Chancellor Karen Carey and Professor Heidi Person. Dr. Karen Carey serves as the Chancellor at the University of Alaska Southeast. As Chancellor, Carey provides strategic leadership in fulfilling UAS's mission, including budget development, academic planning, and program assessments, student and enrollment services, administrative services, and community relations. Chancellor Carey previously served as Provost and Dean of Graduate Studies since June of 2016, coming to UAS from the California State University Channel Islands in Ventura, California. Sounds like a very nice place. Where she served as the Dean of Arts and Sciences. She earned her PhD in psychology from the University of Cincinnati, focusing on the ecological factors influencing young children and their families. She has co-authored 2 books on early childhood interventions, as well as numerous other articles. She has 2 grown stepchildren with her husband, Alan, and 4 grandchildren, along with 3 dogs and a cat. Karen and Alan love Southeast Alaska and wish they had moved here years ago. Dr. Heidi Person, Associate Professor of Marine Biology, runs BREACH, the Behavioral Research and Ecosystem Health Lab at UAS, and the UAF College of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences, whose overall aim is to understand the behavior and ecology of marine mammals and their role in maintaining healthy ecosystems. Pearson earned her PhD at Texas A&M and also holds a Bachelor of Science from Duke University. Chancellor Carey and Dr. Pearson, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate you having us today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And can you see my screen?
Yes, it looks fine.
Great. So what I want to do today is just give you a bit of an update about where UAS has been, where we are, and what our future looks like. So in 2019, we went through our accreditation process with the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities and had a very, very successful site visit and outcome. We were praised for our work that we do with our Native Alaskan population, as well as all of our strong programs and our great faculty. We have, however, faced some budget challenges, I think, as everyone knows. And back in 2017, I believe it was the Board of Regents and governor signed what we call the compact, which provided us a reduced amount that we would have to pay over the course of 3 years. FY22 will be the final year of that compact, and we will have to come up with a $1.5 million cut at UAS, which we think we're going to be able to do. So we're feeling very positive in that regard. We're also feeling very positive because the talk of the merger is now off the table. And that has been really, that was really on the minds of all of us in Southeast Alaska about the possibility of merging UAS with UAA or UAF. So we feel very, very pleased that President Pitney has taken that off the table. As you know, Chancellor Rick Caulfield retired in June, and I was asked to step in as the interim chancellor. And just several weeks ago, President Pitney asked me to serve as the chancellor. The primary reason she asked me to serve in this position is to make sure that UAS remains stable. Because I have several years of experience now at UAS and I understand the UA system, she felt that at this point it was far better for the stability of UAS to keep someone from UAS in the role. So President Pitney has also continuously stressed to the legislature and to all of the public entities that there are 3 separately accredited universities in Alaska. There's UAF, there's UAA, and there's UAS. And that's very important to us because we're very, very proud of our campus in Southeast. Right now for fall, we have over 2,000 students enrolled, and we have done a very good job with COVID. We did have a number of students that tested positive before Thanksgiving with COVID. They had very mild symptoms. We quarantined them. And currently we don't have any students that we know of course, that have COVID on campus. So we feel very fortunate about that. Our students have done an amazing job, as well as our faculty and staff, in following all of the masking protocols that we've had. As I said, the budget still continues to be a challenge, but we are feeling extremely positive. The future at UAS is bright. We're working hard to increase our enrollment and our retention of students. Our programs are strong, and we have great faculty. And that's why I invited Heidi to present with me today and tell you about some of the great work she is doing. We have amazing faculty, like I said, and they are all engaged with our community, with our students, and are getting grants. And I'm just very, very proud of them. So I'm going to go ahead now and turn it over to Heidi for her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for that very nice overview of where we're at with UAS, and thanks to the Chamber for inviting me to speak. So I will share my screen. All right, so I'm involved in a variety of projects focused on marine mammals, and I wanted to just share with you a little bit of a current project that I'm working on with colleagues at UAF and NOAA, centered around humpback whales in Juneau. So we have this tremendous opportunity this summer to study our wildlife in the absence of large amounts of tourism due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I want to share with you a little bit of the background of this project and some of our results that we've just found. So many of you, I'm sure, are well aware of the importance of whale watching, not only in Juneau, but to Southeast and to Alaska overall. And these are some stats that just came out from a recent McDowell Group report that was commissioned by NOAA. So as of 2019, there were 367,000 passengers that went whale watching in Juneau. About 95% of those come from cruise ships. And it's estimated that $60 million was spent by passengers on these whale watches. So at last count, our fleet in Juneau consists of 68 vessels in 20 companies and a maximum passenger capacity of almost 3,000. So if we look at these numbers and compare them to other whale watch industries around the world, we are the world's largest. So that's something to be proud of. It's obviously a big economic driver for Juneau, but also it's something to look at and make sure that we create a sustainable industry as well. And that's kind of what my research has focused on. So this picture here depicts not an uncommon scene in the water or on the water that you might see during the summer. So this is North Pass, and there's 13 whale watching boats here, and they are surrounding a group of 1 or 2 humpback whales. You can see above the red arrow there is a below of a whale, and then you can see a back as well. So it can be very busy on the water during a typical summer. So we do have whale watching regulations and guidelines that have been put in place by NOAA. So we have the major regulation or law, which is that you cannot approach closer than 100 yards from a humpback whale. And then more recently, the past 5 years or so, NOAA has started a voluntary program called Whale Sense, which has a set of guidelines that whale watch companies agree to abide by. So this is a non-binding agreement. It's not a regulation or a law, but they are a set of guidelines to encourage responsible viewing by whale watching companies. And there's also some educational programs that are part of Whale Sense as well. So obviously, as I just briefly covered, whale watching is a huge economic driver to Juneau. And I've also done some work with my students over the past few years to look at the educational and conservation benefits of whale watching. And we have found that passengers learn a lot about whales when they're on their whale watching tour. And they also are encouraged to think about conservation of whales and ways to protect them. But on the other side of this is thinking about the whales themselves and how might they be impacted by these many boats that are typically on the water every day during the summer. And the season goes from early May through end of September. So one of the projects that I worked on with a graduate student at UA Fairbanks a few years ago was to look at any impacts that whale watching vessels might have on the behavior and movement patterns of humpback whales. And so we did this in a totally non-invasive way by setting up observation points on cliff tops or high vantage points around Juneau. So we used Point Retreat Lighthouse and also the viewing outside of the NOAA Lena Point facility. And we used an instrument called a theodolite, which is basically, it's a surveyor's instrument. It allows us to measure angles from where we are to where the whales are, and then using some math, we can actually pinpoint the exact location of the whales and also the whale watching boats. And so we were tracking whales and tracking whale watching vessels and then analyzing the data to see if these whale watching vessels caused any change in humpback whale movement and behavior. So just briefly, what we found, our main findings from this study were that in the presence of whale watching boats, whales changed direction more frequently. They tended to have faster travel speeds, their dive times were shorter, and they had faster respiration rates, or they breathed more quickly. So the potential impacts of these changes on the whales could be that they are having a decreased feeding efficiency. So we know that humpback whales come to Juneau, they come to Southeast Alaska because of our rich feeding grounds. They come here during the summer to feed on herring and krill and other forage fish. And it's a really important time for whales in the summer to put on all of the extra blubber, all the extra weight that they lose when they then go down to Hawaii. Most of them go to Hawaii during the winter to breed and give birth. So feeding is really important up here. So if something is changing their ability to feed efficiently, that's potentially a cause for concern. And then also with these behavioral changes that we measured, it could result in increased energetic expenditure, which could be overall deleterious to the health of the whales. So this graph comes from Raincoast data. And again, it's just showing the importance of the cruise ship industry to Southeast Alaska. And you can see pretty clearly that the number of cruise ship passengers in Southeast has grown steadily over the past 10 years. And it was predicted to almost double by 2020. And typically on a given day in Juneau during the summer, we can have 10 to 11,000 passengers in Juneau. And again, 95% of cruise ship, or excuse me, 95% of whale watching passengers come from the cruise ships. So the cruise ship industry and the whale watching industry are very tightly coupled. So obviously what happened this past summer is we were on this very steady trajectory to break record tourism levels in Juneau. And then of course the pandemic hit and the cruise ship season was completely canceled and there were very few whale watching boats on the water as a result. So amidst this great tragedy for humans, you know, obviously health and economics and general lifestyle on and on, we as scientists looked at this as a potential once in a lifetime opportunity to study what's happening to this wildlife in our waters in the absence of typically high amounts of human pressure. And so we quickly got together some funding, partnered up, as I said, with UA Fairbanks and NOAA, got together a stellar team to get out on the water and figure out what are these humpback whales doing in the absence of high amounts of boat traffic. So our goal was to establish baseline measurements of humpback whale behavior and health in Juneau. And because whale watching has been an important industry to Juneau for the past 20 years, we don't really have any data before the whale watching industry got ramped up. And so we can look at this summer's data as a baseline, a foundation to see what are these whales doing if there aren't a lot of boats around. So our first objective was to determine how many individuals are present in the waters around Juneau and how long are they staying. And then our second objective was to look at the physiology. And in particular, we looked at the stress hormone levels. And one of the hormones we measured was cortisol, which is a stress hormone in all mammals, most animals actually, including humans. So this study was funded by NOAA Fisheries through a grant to the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission. So we're very grateful for the support that we got to seize this really unique opportunity. So in addition to myself as PI, co-PI is Dr. Shannon Atkinson at University of Alaska Fairbanks. She's a physiologist on the team who ran and is still running all of the samples in her lab. From the Akbay Laboratories, NOAA Fisheries, they work out of the Ted Stevens Marine Research Institute here in Juneau at Lena Point. We had John Moran, Matt Rogers, and Jacek Maselko. And then we had Susie Tierlink from the Protected Resources Division downtown. And I'll just say that it was really an amazing team to work with because, of course, no one was traveling. UA system and NOAA had strict rules, very limiting traveling a lot this summer. But because we have this great capacity, this great local knowledge and expertise for humpback whales right here in Juneau, we were able to do this work, which in many other places, frankly, wouldn't have been possible. So we're lucky to have this research and scientific capacity right here in Juneau. So our field effort went from mid-May to mid-October, and all total we had 32 days on the water, covering 184 hours of effort. And this picture here is a very nice picture. It's kind of sunny, fairly calm waters. Those of you that were in Juneau this summer know that most of the summer was not as nice as this, but so we had some challenges, but we did have some really nice days on the water as well. And so we worked from the NOAA vessel, the Sashin, and here you can see 3 of our humpback whales that we were doing photography of at this point. So one of the main research tools that we use is photo identification or photo ID. And this is where we take photos of the underside of a humpback whale's tail or fluke. And each whale has a unique pigmentation pattern, which is basically like a fingerprint. So we take pictures of the flukes and then we can match those images to our catalog of known individuals and figure out who we're seeing. We can also tell who they are associating with. And importantly for this study, also we can track how long they're in the area as well, so we can determine residency. So we're still in the process of matching all of our photos, but we identified at least 60 humpback whales. We also recorded 6 mother-calf pairs, which is really exciting. In all the years I've been doing research in Juneau, which has been 9 years now, this is the highest amount of mom-calf pairs that I've documented for humpback whales. So I think that's a good sign for the population. We saw about 13 whales per survey, and some whales were present for most of the summer, 4 months or more. So the crux of our project was to take biopsy samples. And so we were taking small samples of blubber and skin from the whales, and you can see the photo of that in the top right. And we're interested in the blubber because the blubber will accumulate stress hormones that are circulating around the body. And these stress hormones will accumulate in the blubber. And by taking a tiny sample of the whale's blubber, we get an idea of the stress level that the whale was experiencing over the past weeks to maybe a couple months. So it's a long-term measure of stress, like I said, from weeks to months. So we used a modified crossbow or gun to fire a dart into the side of the whale. And this is minimally invasive. Most times the whale showed little reaction. And it's a standard technique that's used throughout whale biology. And we then get the dart back, and we can take the sample and freeze it and then analyze it. So all total, we obtained 36 biopsy samples of 25 individuals, and 11 individuals we resampled more than a month later. And that allowed us to track changes in stress through time. Another technique that we were piloting is blow sampling, and this is a very non-invasive technique, and it's a relatively new technique in the field as well. So we used a drone, and we put Petri dishes on the drone, and then we had some pilots from NOAA that flew the drone through the blow, or the exhalation of the whale when it came to the surface, as you can see in the photo on the right. So we fly the drone through the whale's breath, bring the drone back, and then if all goes well, we have tiny respiratory droplets that have accumulated on the Petri dishes that we can then analyze in the lab, and we can also analyze hormone levels from these breath samples as well. So we were able to get blow samples from 7 individuals, and all total we had 12 blow samples. And another part of this project was looking at the acoustic world of the whales. So whales, like all cetaceans, their dominant sense is hearing. And so we expected that the water would have been quieter this summer without a lot of vessel traffic. And so we partnered with Michelle Fournet of the Sound Science Research Collective in Cornell University, and we deployed some hydrophones for her in the North Pass area, actually just off Lincoln Island. And we had the hydrophone in the water for a couple months, and Michelle is now analyzing the data to see if there are any differences in the soundscape between this year and previous years. So one of the neat things that we discovered this summer is that there was a lot of prey in the water, and we actually were able to sample some prey and found that it was mostly herring. And these are shots of the echo sounder aboard the research boat. And this is just a kind of a fancy fish finder, like some of you might have on your boats. And so what you can see is the big red blobs towards the bottom are indicative of large schools of prey. So on the left panel there, you can see this is a ball of herring that's at about 200 feet or so. The second photo from the left is showing a mom-calf pair. So these blobs that are kind of cylindrical or curved, those are actually whales that swam under the boat and we captured on the echo sounder. Over here, this middle pane, we see some more fish, a large school of fish sitting right at the bottom, about 175 feet or so. And then this curved shape above it, that's a whale actually going down to feed on that school of wood, which was likely herring. And so on. Here again, this 1 second from the left, we have a whale going down to feed at a prey school that's at about 100 feet or so. And then on the right pane, we see several whales descending to depth to feed on fish. So we had a lot of prey in the area this season, which we think is a good sign that the ecosystem is starting to recover from the warm blob that we had that was affecting all parts of the North Pacific for the past several years. So as I mentioned, we did have some challenges, obviously, with conducting this research. So the weather, was almost the rainiest summer on record in Juneau, but we made the most of it. And then, of course, we had strict COVID protocols to abide by, both at UAF, UAS, and at NOAA. So even though we were outside all the time, we wore masks all day. We did our best to social distance, but as you can see, it's a relatively small cabin. Sometimes we talk about things, so there's only so much distance you can keep. But all in all, we were safe. No one on the team got COVID. As far as we know, we didn't transmit it to anyone. So the safety measures that we had in place worked, and I don't think they interfered with the quality of the research at all. So as I mentioned, we're still analyzing our results. So in particular, we're trying to interpret the stress hormone results, which is really the crux of this project. But what I can share with you right now is some exciting information on the reproductive status of the females that we saw and sampled this summer. So according to the progesterone levels, which indicates pregnancy, the progesterone levels in the blubber, we have detected 5 females that are likely pregnant, and the 5 females are shown here. These are the fluke shots of each individual. And one of these females, named Flame, some of you might know her. She's a pretty well-known Juneau whale. She likes to hang out in North Pass. There's a good chance she's actually the most photographed whale in the world because she's here so reliably. And as I said, we have the largest whale watch industry in the world. So she's a pretty famous whale. She's shown at the top right of the screen. And her hormone levels indicate that she is pregnant again, which means this would be the 3rd year in a row that she is pregnant. So she had a calf this year, she had a calf last year in 2019. And I don't know of any humpback whale that has successfully calved 3 years in a row. So we're going to be eagerly tracking her with our colleagues down in Hawaii to see if she has a calf there. And then of course, looking for her and hopefully her calf coming up here next summer. So our next steps is we'll continue to analyze our lab samples, write up the data, write up papers, share it at conferences and with our peers. We'll also share this information with the whale watching industry as well and the community. And we're hoping to continue the study this coming summer as well. And I'll just end by saying that the goal of this study and all the work that I've done related to whale watching in Juneau is to help ensure that we have a sustainable whale watching industry that supports the economics of the region, but also continues to protect the humpback whales themselves, which are the resource, of course, of which the industry relies. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I know we can ask questions of Dr. Carey now as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karen and Dr. Heidi. That was very great, very interesting information. Again, if you guys have any questions, you can please put them in the Q&A tab down at the bottom of your screen, and we will go through those as we receive them. I see one down there already, and while I'm getting that ready, I'll just ask you, so you were looking at the impact of the boats on the whales and their frequency of diving and breathing and all that kind of stuff. Is there a difference in the type of boat? In other words, as if you have all kinds of fishing boats out there, running around doing their gill netting or whatever they're doing, and do that change anything, or is it do you look at that?
Thanks for that question, Eric. And the answer is, in that study that I described that we did a few years ago, we did not look at any other vessels other than whale watching, just because it was impossible to reliably collect data on, fishing vessels, recreational vessels, ferry, cargo ships. And so we just had to rein it in and tighten our question just to looking at whale watching, because it has an obvious management implication. And so I would love to do another study where we look at some of those other types of vessels. But for now, those results are just focused on whale watching vessels.
Okay. Let's see. The first question we have comes from Wayne. He wants to know, how does the concentration of whales in the Juneau area compare with other locations in Southeast Alaska?
We have a pretty high concentration of whales, and I don't have any actual numbers to give you, but just based on my observations and discussions with colleagues, I would say it is a whale hotspot, because we have the geography here with the fjords that tend to concentrate prey in certain ways, and the whales are basically going where the prey are. And so I would say it's one of the hotspots in Southeast Alaska.
All right. And again, if you guys have any questions for Dr. Carey as well, just put them in there and I will pass them along if you have any broader questions for the university system as a whole. Lindsay wants to know, on this, I guess we'll go to Dr. Carey, what is the breakdown between full-time and part-time students? And what is the breakdown between Juneau students, Alaskan students, and non-residents?
So in terms of full-time students to part-time students, You know, COVID has been a very interesting experience for us. And we have right now about a third of our students are full-time and 2/3 are part-time. And many students contacted us and said there was just no way that they could continue to go full-time because of COVID. Particularly, our students range in the 26 to 28-year-old range. And many of those students have to work and they have children at home. And so because of COVID, they were, they're being asked to do the education also of their children. So many of them have decided to go part-time, and we've supported that and tried to help them in every way. Our Alaska Native students, our Native Alaskan students are about 20% of our population, and they come from across the state. They come from some of the most rural communities. And we're very proud of that fact that we have such a high number of students in the rural communities that want to come to UAS. In terms of Juneau students tend to be our primary population. And we think that because of COVID and students who decided not to go down south for the summer, for the fall semester, they decided to come to our campus. And we're hoping that they find that the education that they're getting at UAS is very positive. Non-residents, it's a very small percentage of our overall population, maybe 2 or 3%. We do have a program, which is a national student exchange, where we bring students here from around the country, and students from UAS can go to other places across the country. And that's been a very popular program. So we get a lot of students coming through that program, probably 7 or 8%. But that's always really nice to have them come, because then our students get to be exposed to students from other places around the country. So I hope that answered your question, Lindsay.
So to follow up on that exchange deal, that sounds really interesting. Do those exchanges last just a semester, or is it for a full year? Is it a certain year of their college career that they're eligible to do that? How does that work?
They can really do it anytime they want. It can be for a semester or a year. We've had students come here on exchange and then stay. They come for a semester, but then they want to stay at UAS. And we feel really fortunate when that happens. But overall, it's a great program, and it's a great way for students to see other places in the country. Many of our students have not been out of Juneau,
right,
and don't know what it's like. So it gives them that opportunity. So we think it's a great program.
Is it a one-to-one that where you have, one student goes out, one student comes in, or you just send as many out that want to go and you take as many that want to come?
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Let's see. Oh, here's another one that's in the chat. Do humpbacks live in Ketchikan year round? I have seen lots of photos of them bubble feeding this time of year there.
That is a great question. And I have not personally worked in Ketchikan, but I'll base it on my observations here in Juneau and elsewhere. As far as we know, humpbacks generally don't, the same humpback won't stay in Alaska the whole year round. Even in Juneau here, we do see humpback whales year round throughout the winter, but it's likely not the same individual that's staying. So what's usually happening is there's some whales that are staying late, they're continuing to feed before they go to the breeding grounds. Some might go to the breeding grounds and then come back really quick to feed. So we're probably seeing this overlap between whales that are leaving late and then coming back early. But it would be great to do a more full-on study during the winter, a photo ID study, to see who's here and for how long. But obviously there's a lot of challenges with that, given the daylight and the weather in the winter.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions coming through at the moment. So with that, I will thank you, Dr. Karen and Dr. Heidi, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. It was very informative. Our presenter for next week will be Brian Holst, discussing JEDC economic indicators and COVID Impact Business Survey. You can sign up for next week's luncheon through the link in the newsletter or the Luncheons tab at junochamber.com. Again, if you need any signs for your business, you can get those from the Chamber office as well. I thank everyone for attending today. I hope to see you all next week, and we are adjourned.